We've been talking about our cycle of loving neighbors, getting into the lives of our neighbors, loving them, treating them with kindness and respect, and then moving them to loving God, getting them to worship, to know God, introduce them to God, and to fall in love with God, and then moving them to serving others, getting into the lives of people who are desperate for help. And there's so many people in the Bible has so much to say about serving others. And then we repeat that cycle. Our theme this year is God first, and our theme verse is Deuteronomy chapter 6:7. This comes from the Shema. You shall teach them, that is the commandments of God. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. And we're breaking this into quarters, which today is the last, am I right? January, February? No, March. There are 3 months in a quarter. I had to think about that for a minute. But we're talking about God and you, and then we're going to move to God and your family. How do you make God first in your family? And then at work, how do you make God first in the workplace? And in the work that we do, the physical work we do with our hands, not just the places we work, but in all of our workings. And then God and others. How do you make God first in the lives of other people? And then, of course, this is sermon by sermon, what we went over. We talked about our health, our physical health. The Bible says to remain healthy so that it may go well with your soul. Physical health is very important for our spiritual life. Endurance, remaining under, being able to endure what life throws our way, helps our relationship with God. God in the Word, getting in the Bible every single day and getting to know who God is on a much deeper level. And then loving yourself, learning to love yourself. The Bible says that we need to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And then humility, being able to be humble is really, really important. We talked about this in class this morning, that Paul had tremendous respect from Roman officials. They liked him, they respected him, and they listened to him because Paul was humble. Today we're going to talk about the importance of rest. Our relationship, DP does this really well. If ever you want to see somebody rest, just watch him during the sermons. He does it well. I want to thank Brent for teaching class while I was away last weekend. And then Jacob preached for me while I was away. Some of you may not know because I don't talk about it much, but every year since my brother Mike died, the remaining 5 of us brothers get together, and this is sacred time for us. We carve out time. It's always the same, within the same week each year. And we said, life is short, life is precious. We never know when our last moments are going to be with each other, so let's make this life count. And so we plan a place. So far, we've always gone to the Smoky Mountains, and we get a cabin that's in the middle of nowhere. We splurge. We spend more money. We get a really secluded place, a place that if we decide that we don't want to go hiking, or if the weather's rainy or snowy or whatever, we can park it at the cabin and just really enjoy our time together as a family. What I didn't tell you, too, well, probably some of you know, is that 30 minutes before we were to leave, Natalie got the news that her grandfather had passed away. Natalie and I had talked about this and decided, actually, I was trying to go to Canada with Natalie to the funeral, and Natalie very, very graciously said, you need this time with your brothers. I'll be okay. I want you to go on this trip. That was a gift. It really was. So Natalie took the kids. She came here after worship, went up to Canada, went to her grandfather's funeral, and then turned around on Monday. They got home like 9:30 at night. So it was a long weekend for Natalie. While I rested, Natalie ran kids around, went to Canada. So she needs her day. When Natalie was there, her grandfather, Eugene Perry, lived to be 100 years old. And Eugene Perry did a lot of work for the kingdom while he was here on this planet. It was pretty interesting at the funeral. Natalie said that people talked about how his enjoyment time was to find things to do to work. He couldn't sit still. He had a restless spirit, and he just wanted to work. And he always tied it somehow to kingdom work. It was always tied to God somehow. And that was his life, and that was what he was known for. He wasn't known as the most friendly person who just chilled out and had deep relationships with people. He was known as the guy who took his relationship with God very, very seriously, and he worked for the kingdom. He was a missionary for years, planted multiple churches. He was the editor of the Gospel Herald, a religious paper that went out to thousands of people. People know him everywhere he goes. And I think it's pretty neat that he started a legacy and passed his faith on. He made God first in his life, and he passed that on to his children. My mother-in-law is Eugene's daughter. Her sisters, her brother, all of them are faithful Christians. Their kids are faithful Christians, and their children are faithful Christians. So you have 4 generations that's been passed down from person to person. But when I heard Natalie talking about the funeral and what they were saying about Eugene, I was like, he didn't really rest much. I think he still rested, but he liked to work. He could not sit still. He couldn't stand to sit still. Me, on the other hand, this is me and my brothers on our trip, and it was absolutely phenomenal. So there were 3 hammocks set up there. My nephew Jonathan went with us too. So these 3 hammocks were set up, and there was one to my right when I took this picture, which I laid in that hammock. So the 4 of us were just kind of sitting around enjoying hammock time. This was our cabin. There was a waterfall beside us, and then there was one behind us. So 2 waterfalls on this little island where the hammocks were set up. And then you see the fire pit. We spent a lot of hours at the fire pit. That was our cabin, which reminds me of the cabin in the shack. It was like this really cool, in the middle of nowhere, this huge, incredible cabin that we spent a lot of hours just sitting in rocking chairs and enjoying life. It was needed. And I am guilty of not resting enough. And probably most of us are guilty of not resting enough. Life happens, right? Life, I was thinking about this. Natalie's grandfather's death was the 4th death that I can think of this year of somebody who was close to us. The year started off with Ruth passing away. Less than 2 weeks later, Betty James passed away. Very shortly after that, the Guybor's nephew passed away at the age of 26. And then Natalie's grandfather passed away. And then I go back and I think about all the losses that our congregation has been dealt in the last just few years. Since 2020, we had Bill Riggs, another one of my very best friends in a family that comes here, the Friedlines. Mark Friedline died less than 2 weeks apart from Bill. I preached both of those funerals. Then we had Nimi Oler died in the spring. Mike Leck died on Memorial Day of 2021. Kim Onder, who lived a couple blocks from here, her husband Jim was coming here. She passed away. I preached her funeral. We had so many deaths, and there's so much that life is throwing at us constantly. And it's not just the deaths, it's the busyness of life, because in the middle of all of that, we still have to be parents. We have to be, whether your kids are still little or whether they're adults, you still have to parent your kids, right, Laura? You're always a parent to your kids. Parenting takes it out of us. You have busy schedules, you have sports, you have academics, you have homework that you have to do. You're just always running. And so on the weekends, what we find ourselves doing is what? Cleaning up the house, doing yard work, picking up sticks, mowing the yard. We're constantly moving. And you don't realize it, but after time, it takes its toll on our body, and it takes its toll on our spiritual life. And God moves from first to somewhere, somehow, on down the list of priorities. It's not that we mean for that to happen, it just happens. And what I found when we went to this cabin, something very strange started to happen almost immediately. I didn't know I was so stressed out. I had no idea, and I don't think it was like any particular thing that stressed me out. It's life, the busyness of life, and everything is going on. But we got there, and I started to rest, and I could feel my health immediately start to improve. I started sleeping through the night. I found out I'm not alone. We inherited, I think, part of my mom's genes, where we all wake up, all of my brothers, we wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, all of us. And some lay there in bed. Joe reads, so he's like, oh, I don't really want to get up, so once I'm awake at 3, I just read. I usually get up and I start working at 3. Brent tells me sometimes, he's like, hey, it's too early to be sending me emails, because I'll send emails at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning. But we all do it, and I think part of that's just, it's like this busyness. What we found is that all of us, when we got to the cabin, we all slept through the night. And slept really well. There are physical benefits of rest. From a scientific standpoint, our brain resets and it processes the day through dreams. Our brains start to store long-term memories through a process of dreaming, whether we remember the dreams or not. Every night we dream, and these dreams are basically compartmentalizing and throwing out the things that we don't need to remember, the stressful things that happened. It's doing away with those, and it's storing and compartmentalizing and categorizing our memories as we sleep every single night. Our parasympathetic nervous system is activated. That's the opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight response. The opposite of that happens when you sleep. Your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, and your body starts to repair itself and restore itself. Quite literally, your body heals as you sleep, as you rest. Creativity is increased. We experience this a lot with our kids. Kids do not like to be bored. They don't. But kids need to be bored. Resting and giving your brain rest increases creativity. That's why sometimes we'll start to doze off, and then all of a sudden your brain gets activated and you're like, okay, I need a notepad and I need to write down all these ideas. Your creativity increases with rest. Sleeping, getting rest enhances your decision-making process. If you're constantly tired, worn out, cranky, stressed out, your decision-making process starts to fail. When you're rested, you can make very wise, very informed decisions, and getting rest reduces your stress, dramatically reduces your stress, which makes you a jolly, happy, peaceful person. You ever notice when you lack sleep, the smallest things just irritate you and make you snap? Getting rest makes those little things seem, well, little. And this is a biblical idea. Matthew chapter 11, this was our verse that was read for us this morning. Matthew chapter 11, 28 and 30, Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls." Not just physical rest, it's this rest for your soul. Sometimes our souls are so restless and we're constantly moving around and we don't know whether we're coming or going. And Jesus says, I will give you rest, and you're going to find rest for your souls. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. This idea of yoking means that Jesus helps you pull your load. It doesn't mean that Jesus wipes out all of your responsibility and you get to retire early and sit on some island in the middle of nowhere and Jesus is going to take care of you. That's not what he's talking about. What Jesus says is that I'm going to put this yoke on you and I'm going to help you pull the weight of this life. And you're going to find rest for your souls. Rest is such a biblical idea. And if we're going to enhance our relationship with God, we have got to rest. I was watching Steve Harvey. He's been talking a lot about his health lately. And Steve, a typical day for him is 16 hours, a 16-hour workday. And he talked about how it finally started to catch up to him. He was like, well, I went out and my job is to make people happy no matter how I'm feeling for that day. My job is to give. And he said eventually, it woke me up one day because he said I was walking towards the mirror and he's like, everybody looks good walking towards the mirror. He's like, but then I turned to the side and he showed a picture and Steve had a Dunlap going on. And he said, I realized my health got away from me. He said, I had to find ways to rest and to exercise and to take care of myself because I was not taking care of myself physically. Rest is such a biblical concept. In Psalm 127, verse 2, it says, in vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. For he grants sleep to those he loves. There's a little footnote there. That word can mean he provides food or comfort to those he loves. And so it's these people who wake up and they're like, I got to put in a few more hours, just a few more hours. I need to do this. I need to finish this project. I need to provide for my family. And we get caught in that trap. All of us get caught in that trap at some point where we're like, I got to provide. I got to work harder, work more hours. I got to stay up later. I got to work. And God's saying, in vain you're doing this. I give sleep, I give rest to those I love. I'll take care of feeding you. I'll take care of providing for you. And I think we all get caught in this trap where we're like, okay, just one more thing that I need to take care of and get off of my list. Natalie just said it the other day. She came home from work and she's like, it was such a stressful day and I have this list and it feels like the more I did, the longer my list. The more I checked off the list, the longer that list got. I was like, yeah, we have days like that. And the great thing about those lists is that list will be there tomorrow. And we need to remind ourselves of that rest is important. Genesis chapter 2, verses 1 through 3, the seventh day is one of the most important days in my opinion. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished and all the host of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work that he had done. Here's a question. God is God. Did God need the physical rest? No. God modeled rest for his people who he designed to rest. And you'll see that in a verse coming up here shortly. And so God blessed the seventh day and made it holy because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation. One of my favorite parts about going to North Carolina when we went last weekend was at night we'd be around the fire. And here, you don't realize how much light pollution we have here in town at our house. We have crazy light pollution. Because of the schools, we're right in between the elementary schools and the high school, and we have the football field, right? Tex, their lights are always on. We've talked about how it's so annoying because we're paying the taxes on that, and they never shut those dumb lights off. But there's so much light pollution, and where we were at, there was zero light pollution, and the stars were just spectacular. And to be able to sit by a fire and rest and look at what all God had done. And I picture God on the seventh day just sitting back, not because he needed that rest as God, but because he sat back and he enjoyed everything that he had made. This canvas is laid out in front of him, and God sat back and actually enjoyed it. Exodus 20, God commands his people to rest. Remember the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, neither you nor your son or daughter. In other words, don't put your kids to work and prop your feet up and be like, all right, I'm getting my rest, but the work is still getting done. No, you stop working. For that one day you rest, your kids rest, everybody rest, your animals rest. Neither your son nor your daughter, nor male or female servant, nor your animals, nor any foreigner residing in your towns. In other words, nobody works. Everybody gets to rest. Can you imagine if we did that? Here, still? Mark chapter 6, verse 31, on their way to feeding the 5,000. They didn't know they were on their way to feed the 5,000. They thought they were on their way to rest, which eventually they got to. But this is how it unfolded. The apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, this is his response, Lord, while you were up there praying on the mountain, we were healing people, we were teaching people, we were with people, and we were doing this and we were doing that, and we're glad that you're here because now we have an extra hand and you can help us heal people. They told Jesus all that they had done, and here's what he said to them. Come away by yourself. He didn't say good job. He didn't say awesome. He didn't say, all right, I got my rest up on the mountain. Let's roll up our sleeves, and I'm here to help. Come on, we're going to kick in. Here's his response. Come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. They were exhausted, and they didn't even know it. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. This is a biblical concept. We don't need to feel guilty when we take days off of work. The work will be there when we return. We need to take time to rest. I thought I had the Hebrews passage. Apparently I don't. But the Hebrews passage says that we need to enter into his rest because God rested, and that rest is holy for him. We enter into that rest, and it's holy for us. Rest is such a biblical concept, and I'm not talking about like just these minor little pauses. I'm talking about a full day rest. And whether we call it a Sabbath or whether we just take it, I don't care what day. I don't care if it's a Tuesday. We need to take time to rest, and we need to do that with our kids. We need to enjoy each other, and we need to talk about God. It's not just resting for the sake of resting, but it's always brought back to God. It's about learning about who God is, and it's about praying and reconnecting with God. Because if all we ever do is work ourselves into the ground, God starts to move down that list of priorities. Rest is biblical. Rest is necessary. Rest is important for our relationship with God. So I hope this week you guys go out, take a day off. If you never take days off of work, take one. Take a day off. Friday would be a great day, right, Joyce? Friday, we're supposed to get a big snowstorm. We can go out and play in the snow. If you guys like the snow. I love the snow. So maybe Friday the kids won't have school. And we can take a day and go play in the snow. But find time to rest. Because if you don't, life will catch up to you. Before you know it, you could be gone. If there's anybody this morning who's not yet taken that time to put Christ down in baptism, if you've not taken that step, we invite you. Or if you have prayer needs, we'd invite you to come up. We're all going to stand and sing this song together.